Rome didn't build an empire on courage alone. It built it on debt. When we think of Roman legions, disciplined and fearless soldiers usually come to mind. Shining helmets, sharp swords, perfect formations. But behind all of that was a much more ordinary and much more expensive reality: money. Thousands of soldiers needed to be fed every single day. They needed to be paid. Roads had to be built. Weapons had to be produced. Horses had to be fed. Siege engines required wood, iron, and labor. In other words, war wasn't fought on courage alone. It was run on a massive budget. So how did Rome afford this? And why are we still talking about it today? Because when you look closely at Rome's war system, you see a very familiar picture. War wasn't happening only on the battlefield. It was built directly into the economy. Once the system started running, it couldn't stop. Expansion was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. At first, things were simpler. In the early days of the Republic, the army was made up of ordinary citizens. If you owned land, you could be called to serve. You brought your own weapons and expected to return home once the war was over. But as Rome grew, wars became longer and farther away. That system stopped working. People couldn't return to their farms. The army became professional. The state began paying soldiers. Not much, but enough to secure loyalty. And then everything changed. Conquest started generating money. New lands meant new taxes. Slaves, mines, tribute. War began paying for itself and even turning a profit. More war meant more income. But there was a dangerous threshold here. Rome didn't rely on taxes alone. It started borrowing, especially during long and expensive wars like those against Carthage. Huge sums were taken from wealthy Romans. But this money wasn't given for the homeland. It was an investment. The lenders expected interest in return. They wanted tax collection rights and commercial privileges in newly conquered territories. War became quite literally a business model. If war was profitable, more war followed. Over time, this changed everything. Generals gained power by promising greater spoils. Senators became partners in war. Private companies, much like today's contractors, collected taxes, supplied armies, ran logistics, and accumulated enormous wealth. Rome turned into a toga-wearing military-industrial system, and the cost kept growing. Between soldiers' wages and interest on debt, the state constantly needed more money. When conquest slowed or things went wrong, the solution was familiar: devaluing the currency. The silver content of the denarius was reduced. No one announced it openly, but the money was no longer the same. Over time, this continued. Inflation rose. People lost trust in money. Eventually, the system collapsed. And who suffered most is easy to guess. The rich protected their wealth in land, slaves, and assets. The poor were left trying to survive with devalued currency. Taxes increased, forced labor expanded, and military pressure grew. This wasn't just the collapse of the army. It was the collapse of the economy. Now pause for a moment and look at today. States survive on debt. Wars are financed through borrowing. Central banks print money. Large corporations and financial elites emerge stronger from crises. Meanwhile, ordinary people can buy less and less at the grocery store. Feels familiar, doesn't it? Today we don't call it tribute. We call it taxes, monetary policy, stimulus packages. But the system works in a very similar way. Who prints the money? Who provides the debt? Who collects the interest? Who pays the bill? The answer isn't very surprising. What happened to Rome tells us this. A system built on constant growth and expansion eventually hits a wall. When new resources run out, the system starts squeezing its own people. Rome did exactly that. Higher taxes, further currency debasement, bread and spectacles to keep the population distracted. The elites protected themselves. Yes, today's world is different, but the logic of the game is the same. Money and power move together. War is still profitable. Inflation still hits the weakest, the hardest. So what can you do? You can't change the system overnight, but you can understand it. You don't have to believe everything you're told. You can ask, why is this happening? Financial education isn't just about investing. It's about understanding history, seeing how power works, recognizing who benefits from crises. Because most people don't think about these things. They believe inflation is normal, that debt is necessary, that growth is infinite. But history tells us something else. The next time you hear about a new crisis, a new war, or a new economic package, don't just watch. Follow the money. Look at who wins and who pays, because empires rarely fall from external attacks. They collapse from within, when the math stops working. If this gave you a different perspective, subscribe. History has a lot to say, and I'll show you where to look.